but I just thought I would kick off tonight with this story of Jesus. And it's an amazing story. He was doing his thing as he usually does, and he's heading to a place called Nain. And so in Luke 7:11, we're going to follow along here. And if you're watching online, hello all our online guys. If you see on the screen there, the Bible verse will come up. But it says here in this Bible verse that we're going to unpack tonight, it says here, soon afterwards, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was also a widow. And a large crowd from the town were with her. Now in verse 13, it takes a bit of a turn, and it says here, when the Lord saw her, when Jesus saw what was going on, his heart went out to her, and he said to the woman, "Don't cry." Now, we've been unpacking what it means to leave our past in the past, even trying to cope with the pain of the present. But I wanted to break it down to 3 points of views tonight, this story. We're going to read through the story and figure out what happened, but I want to read from different points of views. And I love how Jesus sees what's happening, his heart goes out to what's happening, and he actually says, "Don't cry," to the woman that's just lost her son. Now, from the perspective of the mother, sometimes the journey you and I are walking on and the things we have been through in our past, we can be left thinking that no one could ever understand what really happened. I know sometimes when I've done stuff or I've been involved in stuff or leading me up to this point tonight, there's stuff in my past that I don't know that if anyone in this room could understand. And the problem is when it comes to our past, when it comes to what's been going on, we start to create coping mechanisms that people just see as sin. Now, bear with me for a second because we're going to get into this. But what happens is when we don't go to the past and when we don't deal with what's happened before we ended up here, we create coping mechanisms that no one will really understand, and they look at us and go, well, that person's just in sin. Now, I don't know what this woman was going to do. I don't know what her healing process was. I don't know what got her to this point where she's burying her son. I have no idea what she was going to do after. But what I do know is that Jesus cared. Jesus saw the situation. He saw the pain. He didn't check whether she believed in him or not. He didn't check what was going on. He saw the pain, and his response was, my heart goes out to her. Don't cry. And a lot of us don't think that anyone could ever understand our pain. And sometimes we've created these coping mechanisms that we do just to get through whatever we've been through, and people just write it off as, well, they're full of sin. They've got some issues in their life. Now, I know for some people tonight, this would be hard to understand the depths of this. But sometimes because we haven't addressed our past traumas, we form coping mechanisms just to soothe the pain. You know, we've tried alcohol, and it doesn't seem to really work. We've tried drugs, and it hasn't really seemed to work. Sometimes even as believers, we've tried pornography, and it doesn't seem to really work. Some of us have tried multiple relationships, new friends, new boyfriends, new girlfriends, and at the end of the day, we feel like it doesn't seem to really work. We've tried filling the void with maybe social media and the attention we get off there, and at the end of the day, because of our past traumas, our present isn't being healed because these things don't really work. And I'm not just talking to people that don't believe in God. I'm not talking to people that don't believe in God. This is the struggle of Christians and non-Christians, that if our past isn't addressed, our present becomes burdened by the coping mechanisms of life. And we start to go, well, you know, that person's just full of sin. They just drink on the weekend. They just carry on like that. And they better get their life together. And we haven't dug deep enough into the trauma that's their mechanism to cope with what's going on. And Jesus responds, I don't need to know the trauma. I don't need to know the pain. I don't need to talk about why you got to this place where she was burying her son. But he said, I say to you, don't cry. Because just like this, I've been through most of those lists. And at the end of the day, I feel empty. And some of us can feel like that mother, where we can feel surrounded by the world, full of spectators spectating our pain. The mother's there, the son's there, the crowd's there, and Jesus says, don't cry. When the Lord said to her, when he saw her, he said to her, my heart went out for her, and he said, don't cry. See, Jesus was using his voice. Jesus didn't just feel for the woman, but he spoke to the woman. Now, you got to listen to me tonight, because there's some people right now, you are going through the motions of your past. You're a Christian, you're saved, you might know God, or maybe you don't, and you're still coping with the pain of what happened yesterday. And I'm telling you tonight that you need to listen to Jesus' voice for a second. Because sometimes we have to ignore the circumstances and start listening to the voice within you. Jesus will speak to you. Jesus wants to reach out to you. And here's the thing. You might think, well, I'm too messed up. I got too much stuff going on. And I'm saying maybe for a moment tonight, Heart House, can we just ignore what's happening in our circumstance and start to listen to the voice within? The voice that reminds you, you do matter. The voice that does remind you that he does care. The voice that reminds you not to cry. The voice that reminds you that everything is going to be okay in your life. This is the voice of Jesus. He doesn't need to know the circumstance. He doesn't need to know why the circumstance happens. He just sees someone and says, my heart goes out to them. Don't cry. We complicate it. We see someone that's dead in their sin or something's going wrong, and we go, well, keep crying because you kind of put yourself in that mess. Oh, well, God will eventually grin their heart and they'll put the sin down. They'll come to church and clean their lives up. No, that's not what happens. Jesus gets involved in the mess. Jesus gets involved with the death. Jesus gets involved with what's happening, and he says, hang on, I'm here to let you know, woman, don't cry. Sometimes we have to ignore the circumstance and start to listen to the voice within. See, Jesus didn't just silently care for her. He made it very vocal to her that he was involved in the situation. And I'm here to tell you tonight, I hope I'm talking to somebody tonight, that even though you've created coping mechanisms, and even though you're creating burdens from your past, and even though you have these things in your life like drinking, drugs, whatever it is, can I say this? Even though they hold you down, Jesus' voice will release you out. Come on, somebody believe this tonight, that the voice of Jesus, come on. We're not just talking about, well, they're full of sin, they've got things going on, they drink, they smoke, whatever it is. The reality is we've all formed coping mechanisms. And I don't care if we're a Christian or not. I don't care if I'm the pastor or not. Those coping mechanisms of my past traumas get brought into my present. And then people will go, well, he's just full of sin. No. I'm trying to cope with what happened. And I believe Jesus in a situation when he saw the lady trying to cope with what happened, he used his voice to bring release to her life. He didn't just say, well, it is a bad situation, so continue crying. It is pretty bad, so yeah, that makes sense you're crying. He says to the woman, don't cry, because I'm here. You need to tap into the voice of God tonight. The voice that speaks to your soul. Beyond the noise, beyond the world, beyond social media, beyond the addiction, you need to listen to the voice of God, and the voice of God will say within you, you still matter, you are still a conqueror, and there is more for your life regardless of what's happened up until this point. So even though we have coping mechanisms, and those are holding on to us, God's powerful words will release us if we listen to the voice within. And so Jesus then does something crazy in verse 14. We're going to continue the story. And that's the point of view of the mother. But he goes over there, and it says in verse 14 that he went and touched the bearer that they were carrying on. And the bearers stood still. And Jesus said, young man, I say to you, get up. Now, talk about yeah, we know it's Jesus, and you're going to hear why this is a cool story in a minute. But Jesus is just like, hey, woman, I don't need to know why you're here. I didn't need to know. Now, I need to back the clock up a little bit. She wasn't even looking for God. They weren't even heading in his direction. He was heading in their direction. So let's talk about the past a little bit here, because you're probably like, well, this is for the Christians. No. You might have accidentally clicked on this video and you're watching right now. You're sitting here going, what is going on? The reality is Jesus will come looking for you. And he doesn't ask questions. And he doesn't need explanations. His heart goes out, and then he starts to do miracles in the motion. Now listen to this. Then he says to the man, hey, I say to you, get up. And the dead man sat up and began to talk. And then Jesus gave him back to his mother. Now from the point of view of the son. See, when dead is your identity, anywhere becomes your destiny. The boy had no choice where he was going. The boy didn't even think about where he's going because he was dead. And so when dead's your identity, anywhere becomes your, come on, I'm speaking future tonight to somebody in this room, and you might be looking at me, you might be thinking, well, Sam, chill a little bit, man, because I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I'm good. Dead isn't my identity. And my question tonight would be, and I'm talking to myself, not just to the church, I'm talking to myself. Honestly, when was the last time you were passionate about something God is doing? When was the last time you were moved? When was the last time you were so excited you couldn't contain it in what God was doing in the local church? Because here's the thing. The enemy doesn't have to worry about you letting go of your past as long as he can prevent you from grabbing onto your future. You thought this was just a past topic. This is a future problem. See, when dead is your identity, you end up anywhere. The enemy's sneaky. He doesn't have to stress about whether you let go of your past. As long as he can prevent you from grabbing onto your future. You go, well, I'm a believer, Sam. I believe in God. I trust God. My question is, when's the last time you were excited about what God was doing in your life? When were you believing that he actually had a future? When was the last time when you woke up and you said, "What? Oh my goodness, the fact that I found God or God found me and I'm here tonight or I'm here today, what a beautiful thing God's doing in my life." Because when dead becomes our identity, we end up anywhere. We often hear people say, "I'll just go with the flow." We just go with the flow. We'll just see what happens. I'll just go wherever the crowd carries me. And I don't believe that's the calling for the people in this room tonight. I don't believe it's the calling for your friends that don't even know God tonight. I don't believe it's for people that are online that think, well, we'll just see what happens. I believe God has got something for your life. He's got something for your marriage. He's got something for your kids. He's got something for your life that he's not just saying, well, I hope you end up somewhere, church. He's saying you've been marked to end up somewhere in my name. I believe Jesus is in the business of interpreting and ruining and changing and interrupting funerals. Jesus wants you to wake up. Jesus wants to make us alive again. Jesus wants us to go back to the place we belong. See, this isn't just a past thing. It's a future thing. The past only becomes the past because we accepted the future. And the enemy's not concerned whether you get through the next couple of weeks like I have and gone, well, my past is in the past. As long as he can prevent you from grabbing onto the, listen to me, church, he's not concerned about whether you let go of the past. He's okay with it as long as he can prevent you from grabbing onto your future. And this young boy was just being taken wherever the crowd went. Whatever they did. You might be here tonight and you feel that you didn't realize that death was your identity. But I believe that in this moment, Jesus can interrupt your funeral. See, the spirit of suppression has no place here. I want you to believe this with me tonight. I'm going to maybe do a little bit of an exercise. And I want you to say it in your own heart. I don't want to just preach at you. I want you to just get involved. The spirit of suppression has no place here. The spirit of suppression has no place in my household, has no place in my marriage, has no place in where I'm going. The spirit of death has no place here. Jesus spoke to the man. He said, wake up. The spirit of death has no place here. You want to let go of your past? Start speaking it. What's happening in my past has no place here. This isn't just a past thing. This is grabbing onto a future thing. What's happened has no place here. The spirit of sleepiness has no place here. Come on. God's calling the church, despite the past, to wake up. And I can feel the presence in this room tonight. I can feel some people are starting to wake up. I can feel they're starting to realize there is a future, there is a promise, and God is going to do something in your life. Get up, wake up, and don't let the fear or intimidation or the thoughts of the people around you trick you into think that God's not waking you up personally. Jesus will interrupt funerals. You might have walked in here dead. I'm believing you're going to leave here alive, because that's how Jesus works. He gets involved with the funerals. He gets involved with the death, and he says, I'm going to bring you to life. Because trust me, church. Trust me on this. The devil's not scared of perfect people. He's not scared of the perfect church. He's not scared of a perfect life. What he is terrified of is imperfect people, is dead people, is people that have lost their way, and then Jesus restores them in their lives. That's what he's scared of. So I don't know about you, but I'm willing to be woken up from my death. I'm willing to be told that my past is in the past. But I'll tell you this now, I'm grabbing on to my future. Because Jesus will close your funeral and he will open up your future. Come on. You know how many times we seek God and we go to church and we do all these things, and I'll just talk to myself for a second. You guys can listen. And I still feel empty, and I still feel lost, and I'm still like I'm not sure what God's trying to do, and I'm not sure why I'm not passionate, and I'm not excited, and I'm not ready for what He's trying to do in my life, and I feel lost. And Jesus sometimes says to me, and sometimes I hear the Holy Spirit say, God says, Sam, listen here, buddy. You don't have to figure this out. You don't have to worry about tomorrow. You don't have to have all the answers. What you do need to know is that I'm God and I'll always be God. And sometimes He just tells me to wake up, be excited about the future, even if I don't know what's in my future. So Sam, I need to know, how do I get excited tonight? I need to know what God's going to do next. Some of us don't even know. But here's the principle. Jesus isn't looking for people that do know. He's not looking for perfect people. He's not looking for it to have it worked out. He's looking for imperfect, broken, not sure people so Jesus can wake them up and say, your funeral's over and your future begins. See, God doesn't give us a map. He gives us a compass. Your funeral is over and your future begins. There's a lot going on in this story. The coping mechanisms of our past. Who knows what the woman had to do when she was a widow and lost her son? Maybe she was a goody good two-shoes and she never did anything wrong. Or maybe she went home and suffered the crippling claws of an addiction because she couldn't figure out why she was the last one left. Maybe she did make it. Maybe she did. We don't know. We don't know what would have happened if Jesus didn't get involved. But here's the thing. A lot of us have lived a life where we've had things go wrong. We've had brokenness. We've had abuse. We've had alcohol. We've had all these things. And I don't want to be the church that goes, well, they're just full of sin. Because coping mechanisms are a real thing. They're a real struggle. They're a real thing. And I don't want to push people out from Jesus. I want to say Jesus cares. Jesus will interrupt you no matter where you are in your life. But then the son, he had no choice. He was dead. He was gone. I'm talking in a metaphor here if you didn't catch me tonight. Christian or not, believer or not, we can do this whole church thing with death being identity. We're dead to what's going on. We're sleepy to what God's doing. We're suppressed because the world's so bad. Have you seen what's... And we find ourselves being carried with the trends and the flows of every other church and crowd and whatever it's going to be. But here's the thing. Jesus steps into funerals and he says, I'm going to create a future. And so he says, young man, young church, young believer, young non-new believer, young person that doesn't believe, I say to you, get up. Nothing fancy. Just get up. All right, Sam, I'm going to stand up. No. Not even just physically, just spiritually. Get up. Because if we don't deal with the traumas of the past, it suppresses us in the present. And I don't care how long you've known God, and I don't care how long we don't know God, or whatever the rule book is for following Jesus. If death is our identity, then anywhere becomes our destiny. That means if I just walk around like I'm the pastor and I don't get excited about what God's doing, then who knows where the flip this church is going to end up. But when I speak it out, Jesus is going to do something in this place. God's going to use this church to change Paul Macquarie. When I start to speak it out, I might not have the answers, but I'm believing there's a God that can use my imperfection and make me into something that I wish I could have done myself, but he does it with his power, and then all of a sudden the devil's terrified because it's not Sam and his strength, but it's God and God's strength, and God starts to do something through his people and for his people. So I don't believe that you can walk in here and your past disqualifies you from your future. And people go, yeah, I know that. No, you'd be surprised how many people think and analyze and break down why they can't do the calling of God on their lives. Because either A, they're suppressed in their current state, or they think the future has disqualified them for God, the past has disqualified them from God's future. But in verse 16, 17, I'm going to be speaking to someone tonight. I'm going to pull it in. The crowd was there, and it says here, they were all filled with awe, and they praised God. They said, a great prophet has appeared among us. God, this is what the Bible says, they said, God has come to help his people. Cool, Sam. We know the verse. We've read it before. Maybe we haven't. Maybe first time you're like, okay, he's come to help me, but what's going on? But what got me about that sentence wasn't that they claimed God has helped his people. Most people understand that. What got me on that sentence is that they were filled with awe. That they understood the magnitude of what was happening. That they weren't blinded by the miracle that God had just done in front of them. And so they acknowledged that God has come to help his people. For those that don't believe in God, maybe those that have never been to church before, just want to let you know, our God's here to help you. But for the ones that do know, they were filled with awe. And they say this, it says in verse 17, the news about Jesus spread throughout Judah and the surrounding countries. Now from the perspective of the people. Leave the past in the past, grab the future. But here's the thing. When you know the story, when you know the story spreads. Oh, come on. Pick it up tonight. When you know the story, when you know the outcome, when you know God's going to do something, then the story spreads. You might know your past. So do I. I know my past. I know everything I've done up until the point of me being on this pulpit. You know you're hurt. We all know I hurt. We know the pain. We know the history. But come on, when you know the story spreads. When you know the outcome, it's going to go further. When you know the plan, it's going to continue. When you know God's involved, it ain't going to stop. They knew the story, so the story spread. I'm here to tell you, friend, tonight that you know the story. You know Jesus is going to save you. You know Jesus is going to reach your kids. You know Jesus is going to save your marriage. You know Jesus is going to do something great in your life because we know the story. And when the story is known, what happens? The story spreads. It only spread because the crowd knew the future. There was a dead guy and now there's an alive guy. Whoa! But listen here, church. There was a dead guy. There was a dead guy, and now he's a live guy. Come on. There was a dead us, and now there's an alive us. There was a without Jesus us, and now there's a with Jesus us. When you know the story will spread. The Bible says that people were filled with awe. And the news spread. The news will spread tonight. I'm not just talking about we go out there and we start telling people about what happened. But I'm telling you now, the confidence of knowing that your story hasn't been finished yet. That He's still writing it. And that He's not going to leave you, forsake you, or forget about you. That He's still got the plans and purpose for your life. Once you know the story, then the story will spread. In your heart, in your mind, in your church, it's like you can't control it. We walk around like we don't know the story. I think Jesus died for me. I don't know. I think God cares. He used to do miracles and I don't know what He's doing. No. When you know the story spreads. God did do something in my life. I'm starting to see the vision. I'm starting to see the purpose in all this. I'm starting to be excited for my future. I've been saying this for weeks and I'll say it again. God doesn't prepare your future because you changed your life. He's already prepared your future as your life starts to change. People think, well, if I get it all together and I bundle it all up and here's my sin and I come to the cross and all this sort of stuff, then God goes, oh, she made it. He made it. I'm going to quickly go get their future. I'll just quickly whip it up and put it together. No. Here's the crazy thing about it. Before you even a sparkle in your mother's eyes, the Bible says, before they even knew you existed, as God was forming you in your mother's womb, He had a plan that was fearfully and wonderfully made for your life. It's not about goody good two shoes and they've got all the plans where the bad guys don't. It's about people that are in funerals and Jesus shows up and says, I'm going to disrupt this. I'm going to wake you up. And I didn't just make a future for you because you got good or because you're alive. The future was already waiting for you. So when you know the story, come on, am I talking to myself tonight? When you know the story spreads. It spreads onto my marriage. Hey, babe, I don't know what the outcome is, but I know God's involved, so the story will spread. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know what's going to go on with this church. But what I do know as I speak it out, God's got a future for it. God's got a future for you. God's got a plan for your life. And when I speak it, when I'm full of awe and I know the answer, I know the outcome, then the story spreads. This message isn't just about leaving the past in the past, it's about grabbing the future. Because if we don't, then we just stay in the past. You and I know the story. Maybe some people that don't believe in God, you're about to hear the story. The story is, no matter what you've done, whatever you've been through and what you're going through, or whatever's happened in your life, whether that's bad, terrible, or extremely painful, God still has a plan for your life. God still has a future for your life, and God will still use your life for the most amazing things you couldn't even imagine. Because when you know the story will spread. As Lee comes. Revelations 22:13, Jesus speaking. And I might just be talking to someone that feels dead right now. They feel like that boy being carried, or maybe they're mourning and they feel the pain of what's happened with the mother. Or maybe you're a Christian and you forgot, you believe in God, but you forgot that, God's still God and He still does stuff. And believe it or not, that even though we're in a crazy world right now, there's still miracles happening every day around us. that God's still moving, that God still does amazing things, that God will still grow his church, that God will still transform a nation. You got to believe it. So Revelations 22:13, it says here, and just Jesus speaking, he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. Come on, I know I'm speaking to someone's heart tonight. Jesus is declaring that I'm at the start of this thing. That I'm being first on this thing. That I'm the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the first and the last. And he ends the sentence of saying, I am the beginning and the end. Now, does anyone believe that? Jesus says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. And if that is true, and if that is accurate, and if that is coming from Jesus himself, then don't you think that whatever he started in your life, he's going to finish in your life? I have to read this verse to myself every day. Nelly, I don't. That was a lie, just made me look good, but I should. I'm like, God, I don't know about what's going on at the moment. And he goes, yeah, but do you remember who I was? I'm the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the start and the end. And I'm going to be the beginning and the end. And I'm first and I'm last. And he reminds you of this. And then God's like, don't you think that in the middle of your life, in the middle of the church, in the middle of your relationships, that if I started it in your life, that I'm not going to finish it in your life? Come on, some people's dreams need to be awakened again. God didn't just pluck you from your funeral to have death as your identity. He plucked you to say that if I started it in you, I will finish it within you. He's got a plan for your life. He's got a purpose for your life. And it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter what the people did around you. If he started it, he's going to finish it. That's what he does. Don't you think that if he started it, he will finish it? Some of us have extreme faith. I might need to get off before I get in trouble for saying this next part, but we're already here, so welcome. Some of us have extreme faith that if we went home tonight and hit a tree, that we would end up in heaven. We believe that. Salvation is faith that when we die, something happens afterwards. It's pretty crazy faith. But in the same setting, we could not believe that God actually has a future for us. Controversial, I know. But think about it. I believe that if I hit a tree on the way home tonight, that I'm going to heaven because I did the prayer and I believe in God and I follow him. And for those that don't believe in God, there is a Jesus that died on the cross so that you could have the same outcome. And it's faith that we believe that if we died, we end up in a good place. And then in the same setting, and the yelling pastor man at the front tells me I have a future no matter my past, and we sit there and go, I'm not sold on this just yet. I'm not 100% sure that if I just leave my past in the past, that my future's going to... We start to make excuses that God can't use our life. So if you believe in salvation, how could you not believe that he's got a purpose for your life here on earth? And that's for another part. But I'm starting to inherit this myself. I always write a series out of my own heart. And I'm starting to realize if I have faith that God's going to save me when I die, that I have faith that he can move mountains and all the cool lines we say in church, that wouldn't I also have faith that he's got something for my marriage? Wouldn't I also have faith that he's got more for my kids? Wouldn't I also have faith that he's going to use me to influence Paul McCrory for good and for God? Wouldn't I believe that faith is the same faith that believes I'm going to heaven would be the same faith that I can bring heaven to earth? Come on. This is not just for me. This is for everyone in the room. Believe it. You're only here maybe because you were having a funeral and Jesus turned up to the funeral and said, wake up. And boom, here we are. And then we get a little bit into our Christian walk and we're like, well, you know, I did this when I was younger and I don't think God could. God will use you. God will change you. Don't you think if he started it, he's not going to finish it. That's for your life. That's for our church. That's for you personally. If he started it, he'll finish it. I believe that. Amen.